going to introduce you to my friend David Kelly from AppSumo Originals. He's the general manager over at AppSumo Originals, which is a $3 million a year SaaS product business that kind of works under the AppSumo overall umbrella. They focus on really quick, iterative products that help entrepreneurs be more productive, help them increase revenue and more. And some of the products you probably already heard of, like SendFox, like TidyCal, KingSumo. If you want to go and check those out, definitely have a look. But without further ado, David, over to you, mate.
Yes, this is awesome. Oh, thank you, Han, for that clap. I saw that. That was very kind of you. This is really cool. This group size, this 13 is like a really nice kind of fireside chat group. So I think we're gonna get into some really great details, and then we'll get into some really great Q&A. Hopefully I'll be able to answer some, if not most or all of the questions, and we'll kind of take it from there. So before I start, the first thing I'm very curious about, how many of you know AppSumo? And if you do, you can write yes in the chat. If you don't, you can write yes anyway and make me feel better. So just write yes regardless. But I'm just really curious. Write in the chat if you know AppSumo or not. Awesome, Hein, yes. Okay, cool. Clay, you know them as well. And also, if you guys do know them, what products you bought or how you heard about them, feel free to kind of message that too. Always interesting. I do not, but yes. Thank you, Lee, for following instructions. That's wonderful. Ryan, yes, this is great. So we'll talk a little bit about how we built this email marketing engine to power. Oh, Clay, you interviewed with them 10 years ago. That's so wild. Kelly, yes, excellent. So we'll talk about how we power a lot of AppSumo and specifically our originals team using email marketing. So let's kind of jump in. So we're going to learn 5 things today. The first is how to optimize forms for conversion. So a lot of email, we focus on how do we send good emails, but we actually have to move more top of funnel before we even think about how to write the emails to how do we even get email addresses. And getting email addresses looks at how we optimize our forms. Then we're going to learn about how to send good emails. We're going to learn email metric baselines so you guys know if you're doing good stuff or bad stuff. And then we're going to talk about automating emails and something very important, number 5 here, how to keep your list clean. So quality lists often relate to continued engagement and continued email growth. So we want to be very, very aware of that. All right. Okay. Now, as we jump into the email marketing funnel, another question I'm curious about, and feel free to write yes or no or a little or a lot. How much do you guys know about email marketing? So feel free to write, I know a lot, I know a little, I'm starting, I'm dabbling. Really curious to see in chat how you guys, a little. Fine, cool. Lee, cool, very cool, pretty decent, awesome. Enough to know it's hard. Clay, very honest answer. It's hard for me too, and I've been doing it for a while. Nate, a bit. Sunny, a little. Awesome. So when we look at email marketing, and thank you guys, by the way, for being interactive in chat. I love getting answers to what we're kind of discovering together. So when we look at the email marketing funnel, we're really thinking about email marketing as a funnel and a process and a strategic kind of vision of how to accomplish what we want to accomplish. So oftentimes we relate email marketing to our high-level goal or a high-level metric. And that's not rocket science, right? We do this in business a lot, but everything we do strategically in business needs to relate to the overarching goal. So email marketing, when we think about the funnel, it's how do I get more people top of funnel? How do I get that tofu going and then down to mofu and then down to bofu for eventual conversions? So we're going to start there. And then this is just a slide I feel obligated to put. It's always weird. Just so you know, I'm a real person, I guess, and I'm not a faker. So I advise companies. I've been at AppSumo for a while. I run our originals team and we have some really cool products. And that's enough about me. Let's jump into the stuff that actually matters. Okay, so before we get going, I have another big question. Is email marketing dead? And I think you guys know the answer because this is very much a leading question. So to rephrase this question, how many of you have heard someone say email marketing is dead or read an article with a headline? Lee, I see you raising your hand. I have too. I hear that all the time and see that all the time. Clay, it's a vampire. It's so true. Everyone has been writing off email marketing for so long. And some of you who might follow the startup industry saw recently that Morning Brew is on like a increased growth trajectory, and their entire business model is predicated around email newsletters. So it's not dead, it's just overshadowed in some ways. But in other ways, it's more successful than it's ever been. So let's talk about that a little bit. So the good old days of email marketing, why people are saying that email marketing is dead is because it's shifted a lot. It's changed a lot. So in the old days, you could send to old and active subscribers. You could send the same email to all types of users without segmentation. You could send without authentication. So some of these fancy technical terms you guys might have heard of, like SPF, DKIM, DMARC, were irrelevant back in the days. You could send an email without testing the subject line or body copy, hence spam started filling up our inboxes. And you really didn't have to worry about any metrics besides open and click rates. And email has changed a lot since then. So there's a lot of indications by the Google team that sending to inactive subscribers will get your domain dinged. Sending the same types of emails is kind of stupid nowadays. With so many segmentation options through MailChimp or Klaviyo or even our own tool, SendFox, the opportunities to segment and get better results are now easier than ever before. Authentication has become big. Testing emails have become big. Focusing on additional secondary metrics besides open and click rates have become increasingly important as well. So it's not dead, but it's definitely shifted. Kind of like what Clay said, it's become a vampire, like a different type of vampire. So email marketing has changed. But if you do email marketing right, you get better results than ever before. So to give you an indication, our larger AppSumo team, and we've publicly shared this, our larger AppSumo team will probably do around $100 million in revenue this year, maybe 120. Somewhere around 30% of that revenue is driven by email marketing alone, maybe even 40%. It is a huge, huge factor in email marketing. And with our originals team specifically, this team that I lead, email marketing is one of the reasons why we grew the business from 0 to a $3 million a year business with very limited marketing budget. Okay, so we'll talk about some of that. So email marketing can work, and it can work for a lot of different things. So we talked earlier, about 5 minutes ago, about where email fits within the goal or the vision or the North Star or the OKR, or whatever term you want to use for business. So we've used it in a few different capacities. We've used email marketing to focus on generating free users in this upper left image. We've used it to generate app signups for a product in this bottom left image. We've used it to generate revenue and web sessions in this bottom right image for another company I worked for. So it can be really, really used in quite a few tactical ways, which I think is something that people underestimate with email. All right, so let's talk now about some of those tactics. So we're going to talk about optimizing email forms. And before we send an email, we need to lay the foundation to make sure we're doing the right thing. So there's really a 1-2 punch I wanted to discuss that we've implemented, and it's worked very, very well to generate email leads. So the first thing we do when determining a pop-up is we use Google Analytics to define the pop-up time based on the average time on that page. So we look at some of our most popular pages, we identify what is the time spent on that page, and we make sure we're creating a pop-up that is less than that. And again, this isn't really rocket science. And what I'm amazed by is a lot of business is really just strategic methodological work over an extended amount of time. And everyone's looking for a golden bullet that doesn't exist. So when we say, hey, make a pop-up that is less time than the average time spent on the page and look at your most popular pages, everyone's like, yeah, duh, that's what I do. But then you ask those same people, how many of you are doing that? And very few actually know the metrics that they need to aim for. So the combination of making sure we're putting our pop-ups on the most important page, combined with making sure the pop-up time is under the average time on page, is so critical, especially on the home pages or those other highly trafficked pages that have really, really short time frames. It's amazing to me how many people put like 2 to 3 minute timers on pop-ups on pages that have a 30-second average time on page. So want to be careful of that. So very simple tactical thing. Now, launching a pop-up is also a very strategic process. So using a tool like Sumo, which we created, Opt-in Monster, Thrive Leads, there's a million of them out there. But simple design and copy that resonates with users wins. So check out this image here on the right-hand side. This opt-in rate was around 50%, which is pretty wild. And we'll talk more about metrics, good and bad metrics in a little bit. But the good and bad metrics, this is much higher, basically, than a typical opt-in. So it's really, really quite high. And specifically, we made sure that the opt-in spoke to that page. So going back to the previous slide as an example, most popular pages, highly targeted pop-up, making sure the pop-up actually shows equals success. That's one way to equate success. All right, now let's talk about opt-in rates, because a lot of times we throw things against the wall to see what it sticks, and we're like, is this good? Is this bad? I just really don't know. So we ran some metrics on all the people using Sumo pop-ups, and we made the data anonymous. We kind of aggregated it, and this is what we noticed. Average pop-up rate is around 3%. So in order to climb Mount Everest, we need to first get to base camp. So before you get a 50% opt-in rate, make sure you're getting a 3% opt-in rate. And the top 10% is above 6.5. So if you're aiming for metrics and trying to understand where the pop-up rates, make sure you're somewhere in this range. Okay. And another mantra I think is really, really important. I think this is true of not only marketing, but business in general, is really launching fast. Launching fast. So it's easy to look at these metrics and some of these concepts we're talking about. But what we want to remember is that we can launch and we can iterate. So again, before we get a 50% pop-up rate, we need to first launch a pop-up. And then we first need to understand what the metrics are on that first pop-up we launched. Okay, so we continually iterate, and it's kind of this flywheel approach that has become somewhat famous nowadays. Everyone's talking about a flywheel, but launching the pop-ups, adding a variant to test, testing for a week, picking the winner, launch, iterate, repeat. All right, now let's talk about testing a little bit. So let's move on to step number 2, testing emails. So how many of you guys use a testing service for your emails, whether it's Litmus, Mail Test, or something else? I'm curious if anyone has used a mail testing service. And feel free to write in chat if you have. Okay, Nate, you have, awesome. And Nate, let us know which one you're using. It's always cool. Cool, customer IO, awesome. Hi, nope, yep, a lot of people are in the no camp. Eddie, nope, yep, very familiar. So this, Akil, no as well. And you guys are in the majority. A lot of us don't test our emails, but with spam and deliverability and all these things becoming more important, it's really critical to test our emails and to also make sure that we're writing our emails in the correct way. Okay, so 3 rules of copywriting I like to use when writing emails before we get to kind of the tactical testing part is to really simplify the emails, right? So write like you're talking to a friend. I think a lot of people, when they write emails or when they write marketing copy, they write it like it's a dissertation or a paper at school because that's how we've learned to write. And I used to work for Ramit Sethi, who runs this company called I Will Teach You to Be Rich and Growth Lab. And what has stuck with me so much about what he says is this bar talk technique. So write like we're talking to a friend at a bar. And the point behind that is writing more casually and authentically builds connection with the audience that we're writing. So when we build connection, we increase our open rates, we increase our engagement, we increase our sales, we increase everything. Okay. And then looking at engagement, measuring the success of what we're doing, and then finally accepting the fact that you're going to fail. So it goes back to what we talked about with pop-ups. You just got to launch it, and you just have to try, and you just have to push forward. And one of the things that have made us very successful at AppSumo is we are constantly failing, but we're failing forward. We're making sure to fail in a direction we want to fail. Okay, so when we think about actually sending the copy, and we've initially talked about what does it look like to create forms and pop-ups. Now we're talking about what does it look like once we start getting the subscribers to send emails to those subscribers. And a lot of people just are looking around and they're like, man, I don't know what to write. And let me know in the chat if that sounds like you. How many of you are really running into struggles on what to write. Or if you actually know what to write, I'm curious about that too. It's always interesting to hear. But starting with simple blog posts or updates. And Hein, yeah, always struggling. That sounds so familiar. So starting with simple blog posts or updates, looking at our most popular blog posts or content. And if you're still unsure, sending a survey. So we love to get qualitative data. And sometimes what we'll do, and I'll show this example in a little bit, is if we don't even have any content to feature, we'll kind of aggregate content from around the web. And we'll say, hey, our entrepreneurial audience wants to know how to build a business. What other resources are out there? And how can we help them by displaying our expertise and showing content that they care about? So here's a great example of one of our emails with all the statistics for you guys to see. So we sent this email in 2018, and it was the best e-commerce practices. And there are a couple of things I want you guys to notice about this email. When we write any emails, when we do any marketing, the thing we're always thinking about, the thing I'm always thinking about is what's the benefit to the user for this? So a lot of emails I receive, and tell me if this is familiar for you guys, sounds like the person's just kind of talking into a vacuum because they want to hear themselves talk. They just don't even spend 5 seconds to think about what does my audience want. So with this email, we're thinking about why should the reader read this email? Does the reader relate to this email? What are they actually going to learn? And then a final push to get them to click. And also notice how short this email is. So there are people like our team, we write short emails. There are also people who write long emails, and it can be a personal preference, but we don't need to go above and beyond. And I think there is a fear we have oftentimes, and I've often had this with email marketing, where it's like, okay, got to buckle down and write this amazing email that's worth someone's inbox. And we need to find that balance between making sure that we're respecting the user's inbox and adding value, but also not holding ourselves back from contributing content. All right, here's another email that I think is really fun. And the reason why I want to show you guys this email is because this is so outlandish. It's so different. And what this email represents is, I think, the importance of regular communication and authenticity. So we talked a little bit about authenticity earlier. Here's a great email about authenticity. So this email being about nothing, right? Why should I read this email? What does he mean by nothing? What's the point of this email? What should I do? Some of these things that kind of go along are really, really, really critical to making sure that we're focusing in the right way. So you can also have fun with emails. You can also like really kind of lock in and make it simple and just enjoyable with emails. All right. Now here's the third example that I think is really, really valuable. This example is about curating content. So we talked a little bit about curation and the content behind curation, right? So in this example, in this Bonnie to Beasley example, which makes great emails, we're focusing on organization of the emails. We're focusing on simplification of the emails. And sometimes we're just displaying expertise, and we're curating and connecting and contributing content that we get from the web. So they didn't even write this article. They just featured this article, which I think is really, really cool. All right. So being a trusted advisor for your subs or subscribers, in other words. Okay. So now we wrote and we sent an email. Now what do we do? Next up in that funnel, in that process, is measuring results. So there we go. Oh, there we are. Too many clicks. So everyone wants to know email statistics. And here they are. We're going to start sharing them. We're going to start talking about open and click rate. So check these out. This is what we noticed. This is actually pulled from 2 to 3 months of data for the emails that we sent. So we have some examples of different list sizes, and we can use these as baseline. So if your list is over 200,000, what we notice over 2 to 3 months of time is that we're seeing around a 19.5% open rate. If your list is lower than 50,000, you're seeing 22. If it's lower than 10, you're seeing 30. If it's lower than 5, you're seeing 35. So these metrics help us understand the baseline. for what we're expecting, and similar with click rates. All right, and click rates are a little more variable because it does depend on the content inside. So that's why you're seeing some jumps across. But as far as open rate goes, that's typically more aligned with the size of the list. Okay, so then the bottom line for open rate, when we think of big versus small email list, is under 100,000. We're thinking of a 20% open rate or above, at least. We're noticing now with active sending that it has to be above 30% open rates. And we'll talk about active sending a little bit. And then if you're over 100,000, closer to the 10 to 20% range is typical. Although with active sending, we're noticing that's increasing as well. So very, very baseline. Now unsubscribe and spam rates. How many of you guys check these? Let me know in the chat. Also buys me some time to drink some water. More than I should, yes. Kelly, nice. I don't check as much as unsub. Okay, cool. All right, check. Okay, nice. Only recently started by Eddie. Cool. Okay, so let's talk about spam and unsubscribe rates. So really important to be aware of what the spam rate is, or the complaint rate, or the abuse rate. Every email tool refers to it differently, and what our unsubscribe rate is. So on average, we want to keep our spam rate below 0.02% per email. That's kind of what we notice the threshold is before things start getting a little hairy if we're regularly passing this threshold. And then unsubscribe rate on average. So we want to keep that below 0.2% per email. And there are times, and I think this is important to emphasize, where an email is a little above or below, and that's okay. But what we want to be cautious of is we're not regularly passing this threshold, and not every email is passing this threshold. All right, and then the testing trifecta to make sure that we're actually checking how these emails are performing and preparing ahead of time. This is what I was alluding to a little bit earlier. So Send Check It has a great tool to test subject lines to make sure there's no spam trigger words, promotion trigger words, et cetera, et cetera. Mailtester.com is another great example. And then Litmus and Email and Acid, which are paid solutions, also help you understand how is this email received, or how does this email look to typical spam filtration. All right. So now with kind of the email marketing established, it's time to think about automation. So we've talked about the email forms and how to get top of funnel. We talked about testing emails and copywriting. We talked about measuring results. And now we're going to talk about automation. So drip campaigns, and there are a lot of different words for drip campaigns, automation sequences, like a billion other things, are sent typically after sign up, content upgrade, or carrots, often carrots, some of you may have heard, purchase, or some other type of event. And what they're used for is to hyper engage people when they're most interested in receiving that hyper engagement. So there is an obsession as we think about kind of this engagement. I do want to draw back to make sure we don't lose sight of the forest for the trees, where people are like, oh man, I have Klaviyo and I have MailChimp, and now I can do these 45,000 things. So with my list of 300 people, I need to do like 85 different automations. And I have a friend here in San Diego who runs a surfboard company, and they're pretty successful. They do like $1 million a year in revenue. He's always so hyper focused on segmentation and engagement within Klaviyo, but his top of funnel, his list size is shrinking, and it's been shrinking for like 2 years. And it's only around 20,000 subscribers now. So what we also want to be hyper aware of and cautious of is we're optimizing for the right things at the right time. So if our list size is shrinking and we're trying to run a multi-million-dollar business, it's often easier for us to focus on top of funnel growth into the email list instead of adding like the 35th segmentation email sequence that we have. It's like, segmentation number 35 for our email is not going to help as much as like growing top of funnel would be at that point. So I want to make sure to drop back out to that. So simple formula for winning drip sequence or automation sequence is email number 1 is hello and gathering some qualitative feedback. So we've made those first emails sometimes even 2-sentence emails. So something like, hey, welcome to the list. What's the number one thing you want to learn? What's the number one struggle you have in your business? So using some of that Ryan Levesque ask methodology is something we really subscribe to, about how to ask proper questions for really proper qualitative answers. Then email number 2, it's like, cool, let's just feature some of our evergreen content. Here's 3 links that we think you're really going to like. And then email number 3, 24 hours later, 48 hours later, something in that range. Here is the problem that we think you have and how we can solve it. So thanks for joining our list. What's the number one thing you want to learn? 24 hours later, here's some great content. 24 hours later, here's the solution to the problem that you signed up for this list to get. And we can pitch our product or service or course or whatever we're selling. All right, and here's a great example. So a hello sequence by one of our brands. So just a very personal, I love you, right in the first line. And then pushing to subscribe to a YouTube channel with 3 pieces of content, right? So it's kind of blending some of the approach we just talked about a second ago, and you can get creative with it. Email number 2, 3 pieces of content, which is really cool. Email number 4, we wanted to hire more people email number 3, we want to hire more people for our brand. So we had them take the action of filling out the form. So maybe that email number 3, we talked about quote unquote selling. It's not necessarily selling a product or a course. Maybe you're trying to sell getting on exploratory phone calls. Maybe you're trying to sell more applications to fill roles at your company. It can be really, really opportunistic to promote different things. All right, and then we could see some success with these. So 24% open rate, 5% click rate, 22% open rate, 3% click rate, 22 and 5 on the last email. So some metrics that we talked about as far as list size goes, that aligns. All right, now basic segmentation. So we talked about the warning signs of advanced segmentation and trying to do advanced segmentation before we need to do advanced segmentation. It's kind of like an analogy of running a marathon. It's like before you have to worry about running 24 miles, maybe just like worry about 1. Just do 1 mile, right? And with segmentation, the same thing kind of applies. So one of the very simple ways to start with segmentation is just by click triggers. So we looked at anyone in this previous email that clicked a very specific link in email number 2 that went to a podcast. And then we sent them this email, or I'm sorry, YouTube video. So we sent this email to then drive them to take a subsequent action that benefited us. So for YouTube, it was like, subscribe to the channel, make sure. For podcasting, it was, hey, make sure to subscribe to our podcast. So segmentation doesn't need to be this huge ambiguous cloud. It can often be very, very simple. And then look at these open rates and click rates. Pretty insane to see an 86% open rate, 24% click rate. And that is proof that segmentation can work very well and that we don't need to go crazy with it. We don't need to build out these insane flows. We can just look at what is a hyper-targeted action that then leads to a subsequent email. All right, and now the last thing I kind of want to talk about before we get to some Q&A is how to keep our list clean. And this is so forgotten about, but as we continue to do email marketing, list cleanliness has become an increasingly important part, as evidenced by inbox providers, of making sure that our emails continue to deliver to the inbox. And if we don't have emails delivering to the inbox, then we really don't have anything. We can come up with the best content, but if they're going to the spam folder, it just doesn't really matter. All right, so let's talk about step 5. So last year, or a couple years ago, maybe, I can't remember, we managed to talk to a Gmail anti-spam team member, which was amazing. So they have, it's so cool. They have this like 4-person team at Gmail who's basically responsible for setting all the regulations on how emails get into the Gmail inbox. It was like, this is the hardest intro I've ever had in my life. It's like celebrities, I don't even care about celebrities. I just want to know a Gmail anti-spam team member. And it was really, really fascinating to hear what they said and to glean information from them. So the few things they said, and I think this is really, really fascinating, is making sure to spend time focusing on engagement with the emails. So they heavily weight engagement, meaning people clicking and opening as some of those top line metrics that we have talked about and that are well familiar for many of us, but also the time spent in the email, the number of replies that come from that email. So engagement in every facet has become increasingly weighted. Another thing is unsubscribes aren't always bad. So Gmail has placed less weight on unsubscribes as time has gone by. And of course, we want to stay kind of within those thresholds we mentioned. But they mentioned if you're making an unsubscribe easy to accomplish, then you're doing your job. The worst thing, and why we want to be very careful with that spam metric, is because spam and having an email marked as spam is so easy for us nowadays. So even I do it. It's like I get an email that I don't remember signing up for, and I try to unsubscribe, and like the unsubscribe page makes me type in my email address and check boxes. I'm like, whatever, I'm just going to mark this email as spam. It's super annoying. So a lot of people are doing that. And we want to avoid getting our emails marked as spam, both by sending to active subscribers with great content and making it easy for them to leave a list if they no longer want it. Okay. Okay, now what we want to make sure to do is that we don't have poor metrics that then lead us to go, oh shoot, I gotta clean this list. We want to proactively approach. So the biggest proactive approach that we've seen is by making sure to remove anyone who hasn't opened in the past 3 to 6 months, and they're older than 3 to 6 months within the list. So in other words, they're an inactive qualifier, right? So the way we spin that around is the only people we're sending to oftentimes are people who have joined our email list or clicked or opened an email in the past 3 to 6 months. And that's how we qualify it. And then we'll move people who have not taken those actions to a non-sending list. And we'll try re-engagement sequences or re-engagement emails on that once a season, once a quarter, something along those lines to try to get those people back in, try to push those people back in. All right, so we made it. We made it through. And just as a reminder of the funnel, to take a step back, because we want to make sure we don't get lost in the weeds. It really all starts with optimizing your email forms and making sure you're getting great top of funnel. And then it's about how do we write good copy. And good copy doesn't mean it has to be complicated. Good copy can be simple. And with the results, so now we're sending emails, we're setting up our forms. What are those results that are baselines? And we talked about some of those baseline metrics from our actual businesses. And finally, we're talking about automation. So our top of funnel is running. We have a sequence that needs to be created. So we create that sequence, and that can be another simple process. And then finally, before we continue our email marketing processes after we've just started, as the months go on, we want to make sure that we're only sending to the right people.